Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I just want to talk a little bit about some of my favorite moments from Teen Wolf. Do know that this video will contain a lot of spoilers. I'm going to be talking about things kind of all across the series. So if you have not seen all of Teen Wolf, and I do mean that specifically all of Teen Wolf, because there's certain things that I'm going to talk about on this list of mine that pertain to the final episode. So if you have not seen all of Teen Wolf, do not watch this video because it will spoil things for you. I mean, don't even feel like, okay, watch all of Teen Wolf and come back. Just watch all of Teen Wolf. You don't even have to come back to this video because I love Teen Wolf. It's such a good show. I'm sad to have seen it come to an end, but I'm happy with the way it ended. So, but nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. The real focus of this is my favorite moment. So let's get into it. One of my favorite moments is in season 3, specifically season 3A's finale. We have Scott becoming a true alpha. I don't remember the exact situation, but it's like Jordan Blake had put up like a barrier, or she had used Mountain Ash or whatever, and Scott, to get close to her, was ripping into it, because obviously that part of the season they had started bringing up, like, oh, like Scott might have the potential to be a true alpha. Now really quickly, for anyone who might not be like, oh wait, I actually forgot what a true alpha was. A true alpha is when someone rises to become an alpha by sheer will of their own. Typically, you know, betas, to become alphas, they have to kill an alpha and basically steal the power, like Derek did at the end of season 1 when he killed Peter. Well, killed Peter. I mean, he still technically killed Peter, just like, I wonder how that whole thing works with it. Does it still technically count as being killed when you come back? I think so, but nevertheless. But Scott did it by sheer will alone, and the fact of the matter is, it's like a very, like, super rare thing. I think they were saying, like, true alphas come about, like, every 1,000 years or something like that, so. It's something interesting, like a little tag side, like side note. I was always kind of expecting Liam to become one too, like at least by the end of the series. It never happened, but I mean, there's always a potential that it happens later on down the road. But I always felt like that might be like the path they were going to make him take. But nevertheless, it never actually played too big a part in the story. Like, I mean, obviously it added to the legitimacy of Scott being an alpha, because everyone was just like, oh, Scott's gotten this far without having to spill blood. Because any other time they bring it up during the series, they always just refer to him as an alpha. It never comes up later on, at least not to my recollection, about him being a true alpha. So it's like, oh, he got there on his own, but it's still, he's kind of like a regular alpha any other way. So it's, I don't know, it's just something interesting that always kind of stuck out in my head. Another thing in the series is learning about what blue eyes represent. And it's something I've talked about in the past when it came to Teen Wolf. It's such an interesting concept for werewolves in the series, that, you know, blue eyes representing like, oh, this werewolf killed an innocent person. And it's such an interesting thing, because it's like a stigma that it's always there. Like the moment you see blue eyes, it's like, oh, I recognize what that means. That means this person killed an innocent person, whether it was by accident or intentionally. So, because the first example of you learning about that was when it was Peter explaining Derek's past, about how his eyes became blue. That's how our first introduction. So it's like, for one, that represented learning more about Derek's tragic past, but also learning about an interesting concept that they had never really brought up before. It's like, oh, like at that time, it's like Derek was the only werewolf that had ever had blue eyes, and even like Stiles was just kind of like, oh, he just assumed it was just kind of a thing. He never knew what it represented, you know. So it was just kind of, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I love it because it's like, oh, it's just a little tad bit of like mythology mixed in there. It's like, it's something they didn't even have to include, but it was just something that they're like, oh yeah, no, this has significance. Another favorite moment of mine was in season 5, and it was when Kira was losing control of her kitsune abilities, because I always find it fascinating in that situation, because it's like, amongst most supernaturals in the show, like Kira's power represented itself in a very different way, because obviously werewolves shifted, and obviously like you have other people like Kinema who like had different bodies, but more often than not it's just like teeth and eyes that typically change. Obviously, like I said, werewolves change exteriorly like a little bit more, but like her power, like I guess also because there's like that Naruto nerd in me that looks at that and thinks immediately of like the nine-tailed fox from Naruto. So like her power would take on like this aura around her in the shape of a fox, and it was kind of interesting, because it's like it represented a side of Kira you had never seen up to that point, like her like berserk and losing control of her powers. And it was just so interesting seeing her. Obviously she was super scared, but it was also like cool because you saw like how powerful and scary she was, you know. I mean, eventually she came back after training with the skinwalkers to learn to control it better, but even then, like, we never got to see her like fully access that power and control it. So I don't know, like, even if she did get back control of her powers, I don't know if it would necessarily represent represent itself like that, because it'd most likely be like, oh no, that was only like the kitsune inside of her, like raging, that looks like that. Outside of that, you know, maybe it's like once she gets control of her power, it's like, no, you would never see that again anyway, you know. So, and the next thing on my list is, as I referenced earlier, I'm going to be bringing up stuff from even the final episode. And in this particular case, it's about Scott's fight with the Anukete. And I love how this fight broke down in a sense of like, hey, like, it's taking on the form of different people to kind of mess with Scott here. At one point, it takes on the form of Berserker. It takes on the form of Stiles. Specifically, Stiles when he was possessed by the Nagitsune, and actually even taking on the form of the Nagitsune, and obviously taunting him about not being able to save everyone that he cared about, in particular, you know, Alison. Like, oh, you failed her. You couldn't save her. And it kind of coincides. It's kind of a same moment, but also a different separate moment too, but I just kind of lump it together, is how he handled the situation of literally clawing his eyes and damaging them so he wouldn't have to worry about looking at the Anukete. And because it was such a brutal moment of like what Scott was willing to sacrifice to fight this thing, to defeat it, to make sure that he protects everyone that's important to him, to protect everyone from this thing. Another moment to me that really stood out is the moment back in season 2 where Derek was trying to build up his own pack, and he wanted Scott to be a part of his pack. But then eventually, as time went on, he was like, I finally understand. The reason why, like, I can't bring you into my pack is because you already have one, at that time being Alison and Stiles. And it's like, you already have a pack of your own, so that's why you don't feel the pull of me wanting to wanting to be a part of a pack. You don't feel that pull because you already have one of your own. And even then, I mean, that was just the catalyst of really recognizing his pack of being what it is. Like, not just werewolves, but his pack being more. Obviously, 2 humans, Alison, a hunter, and Stiles, like I said, kind of the brains of the operation. But eventually it would be Lydia, the Banshee, Malia, the were-coyote, obviously Liam, his beta, as well as like Mason, another human. So it's just kind of the starting point of realizing, just like looking back at how far his pack has grown. Like, obviously there have been moments of loss and gain, but obviously, you know, just to see this pack, and that's not including everyone, because there's still other people I think would still fall under his pack. Obviously his mom, Sheriff Zelensky, Papa Argent, I think they would all kind of like still be categorized as part of his pack. I don't know if someone like Theo's kind of like I don't really know. Peter's kind of I don't know. Eventually Derek himself kind of too. So, I mean, because they become more than just a pack. They are his friends. They're his family, you know. So, I don't know, it's just kind of a beautiful sentiment, just like looking at that one moment and just seeing where we are at the very end of the series, like the literal final shot of the series. Another big moment, you know, favorite moment of mine is when Lydia and Scott go inside of Stiles' mind to kind of pull him away from the Nagitsune, and like they're trying to rush towards him, but it's like they can't reach him because it's almost like a forever looping room, and you see Stiles kind of playing chess against the Nagitsune, but it's like, or was it checkers? I think it was chess. But nevertheless, it's like we can't reach him. He can't hear us. It's like, well, how do werewolves contact their pack? They howl, and you see like Scott roars, and then like it hits Stiles, and then he like flips the board and kind of takes back control. And eventually, at that point, obviously they split into 2 beings. Obviously, the Nagitsune, still looking like Stiles, leaves, but then they unbandaged what they thought was the Nagitsune, and it was Stiles underneath, kind of returned back to normal. Because I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand with that moment too. It's just, well, not that moment in particular, but everything involved in a situation of Stiles actually being the Nagitsune. It's just because, like, once again, I've said it again, I've said it once, I've actually said it multiple times, I say it all the time actually, to correct myself, that Stiles is kind of the brains of the operation, and it's like the person that you rely on to kind of help figure things out. He's kind of like the mystery solver. To have him be the bad guy in that situation kind of flipped everything upside down, because you didn't have the one person, you know, for one, that's like Scott's best friend, that's his brother, and now it's like he's possessed, and it's like, how do I help him? How do I fight this thing without hurting the person that's one of the people that's closest to me? It just added like a whole new weight to the show, you know, in that particular arc. Another favorite moment of mine, it actually takes place in season 3A, is when Lydia kind of awakens as a Banshee. Because chronologically speaking, Lydia was the first one to kind of really be affected. Because, like, really, this is going to go in a long explanation, but the fact of the matter is that basically, obviously, a werewolf's claw can unlock supernatural potential within someone. Now, Lydia, for example, became a Banshee. You have Jackson becoming a Kinema, eventually becoming a werewolf. Well, I mean, obviously, at the end of the series, we find out that he still maintains some of his Kinema style, which was always cool. That was kind of cool to find out that he still had that. Kate became a were-jaguar. But obviously, like, chronologically speaking, within the show, like, Jackson became a Kinema before Lydia awoke to become a Banshee. It wasn't until Jordan was like, oh, you know what you are, you're a Banshee, scream for me, and she awoken as a Banshee. And obviously, like, the weight of what that holds, what it means to be a Banshee, that always being foretelling death. I mean, obviously it helped them in the long run, but it's still like, that's a heavy burden for anyone to like harbor and hold on to, just because it's like, you kind of don't know if you're going crazy, and you have to kind of interpret, like, you know, Lydia always has to kind of interpret what she sees or what she feels. But kind of going back to what I was saying is, like, because Lydia's grandmother, because we ended up finding out in season 4, her grandmother was actually a Banshee. So it's like, it brings up the question of, like, would Lydia have ever awakened as a Banshee if it wasn't for Peter in season 1? If that had never happened, would she have ever just naturally awakened as one? Something that always kind of goes through my mind. I feel like maybe not, but I think those are the only 3 examples during this series of, like, werewolves bite or claw mark making you something else supernatural, because everyone else claw and bite mark wise turned into a werewolf. So I mean, on top of all that, kind of going back to, like, focus on Lydia, is the fact of the matter is what she eventually learned how to do with her powers, like being able to take her Banshee scream and focus it into, like, actual attacks. Obviously she learned how to do it back in season 5. Technically I think it was season 5B, I want to say, but obviously the way season 5 was done, where it's kind of like the storytelling was almost a little out of order, because a lot of the Lydia stuff happened at the beginning of season 5A, but it really didn't take place until, like, season 5B. Even to the point, like, she was able to rip down, like, in the final season, what was it, like the second to last episode or whatever, she was able to literally break down a steel metal door just with her scream alone, just showing you how powerful she is. Another favorite moment of mine is when the beast is attacking. It's in the library, and there's basically all the students gathered around, and you have, like, one lone Scott standing in front of it and just kind of, like, rearing up to fight it. And it's fascinating to me that moment, because that's kind of like the antithesis of the entire series. Scott being there to kind of protect, you know, not just the people he loves. Yes, they're important, but also protecting everyone else from, like, the supernatural things that kind of attack the Beacon Hills. And it was just kind of a, like, almost like a David and Goliath moment, because obviously, like, I'm pretty sure, because at that point he'd already kind of crossed paths with the beast before, and it already really messed him up. So it's just like he was already kind of a little messed up, but he sees all those people scared in the library, and he's like, I gotta do this. So it's just a monumental moment, just showing you why he is the true alpha that he is. Similar thing, another moment of mine is kind of similar to that, and that's Liam and Scott fighting in the library themselves, just because it's like, you know, obviously Theo manipulating the whole situation, because you obviously from the very beginning you had, like, Stiles being like, I don't trust this dude, and basically that moment Theo had basically broken up, you know, because like I brought up earlier, that was around the time they were dealing with the whole Kira being out of control, and then Stiles kind of keeping the whole, like, him killing that kid who was a chimera. It was self-defense, but he felt, you know, like, ashamed of it, that he couldn't tell Scott the truth, and the fact is he was hiding it, not just from Scott but everyone, because Theo made him feel like he needed to hide it. Just like slowly tearing apart his part, because at the same time Malia was dealing with the whole Desert Wolf, her mom situation. So, and at the time Liam wanted to save Hayden, so, you know, for him it's like Scott wouldn't turn her, and so he took it upon himself, and he was like, if I can't, I have to take that power from you and make it so that I can save her. And if I remember correctly, Mason came in time to stop him, because he's telling him about Hayden, so he ended up leaving. But obviously Melissa was super pissed about that later on, but luckily she was able to bring Scott back, because he was on the verge of death. I think the way she kind of puts it, like, he literally did die, but she was able to resuscitate him. So I mean, that's a moment of, like, you know, obviously, like, the person, and it's something that Gerard kind of brings up in the final season, like the connection between an alpha and a beta, and their beta, it's probably even stronger than the relationship between a parent and their child. It's just that much. And to think about, like, the fact is that to that point, that to see, like, tragedy situation written around it, you know, it sounds like something out of a Greek mythology, like tragedy or something, you know, which probably is something very similar to that. A heavy situation. Like ultimately, they were able to make things better. It took a little while because Liam, you know, felt bad about what happened, but you know, like I said, it's a situation where he just cared about Hayden so much that he wanted a way to save her, and just to him, you know, feel in his head and just feeling like he had no other choice, you know. So like I said, ultimately things got better. They did move past it, so, which is a weird, awkward thing to kind of have to get past, but still. Another one of my favorite things about Teen Wolf was probably the reveal of what Parrish is, him being a hellhound. Because like obviously that was kind of like a thing, because obviously at that time MTV would do a lot of like hashtags with their TV, like in particular episodes. So it's like, oh, hashtag what is Parrish? You see him kind of get burned by that sheriff who was actually, you know, I think he was a wannabe hunter because of the whole Deadpool situation around season 4. Try to burn Parrish, but Parrish just came out of the ashes, and it's just like to finally figure out what he is was so cool, and what he represents. Now I take it back, because I brought it up earlier about the whole Kara being the only one that has like a representation power. I was like, no, I'd forgotten, like, you know, Parrish has like the whole fire thing, which obviously like you see him kind of, even in the final season, I think it was in particular a final episode, you see him kind of like push his fire forward, almost kind of similar to how Lydia kind of pushes her screen. So that was just kind of an interesting thing. But I mean, obviously moments throughout the season you just see him go all hellhound and just kind of raging out. It never seems like Jordan ever controlled it. Like, you know, it would seem more like Parrish just kind of like let it kind of loose. It was something that was never really dived too deeply into it, but technically like Parrish had died and the hellhound had possessed him, so they never really dived too deeply into it. They dived into it, but there was never anything beyond that upon you finding out like, oh, technically Parrish died, but I guess like the hellhound needed a disguise of sorts, so it kept a persona, like kind of, I guess in a way kept Parrish's soul around, you know, or maybe when it possessed his body, it regenerated enough to kind of bring him back from the dead. Maybe it's mimicking who Jordan was. I mean, it's so interesting when you like think about it too much. You know, there's probably somewhere out there that's like, oh no, it works exactly like this. But I've always kind of been, it's interesting to kind of look at like how that whole hellhound situation worked for Jordan, you know? And I do note that I keep saying Jordan, which is confusing with the whole, God, I forgot, because I don't remember what kind of creature she actually was. Jordan Blake, the one that like Derek had a thing with back in season 3. Like, I don't remember what she was called. It's something with a D. It's not a druid. At least I don't think she was. It was something else, wasn't she? I don't remember, so I do apologize for that. I should have brought this up earlier, but I forgot it was on my list, and that's actually kind of another reveal, and that's back revealing that Mason was the Beast. Because it's like the entire time, like, who could the Beast be? Who could the Beast be? Obviously it was Sebastian, but obviously like it had, you know, taken residence in Mason and he didn't realize it. But it's kind of very similar to the whole like Stiles situation with the Nagitsune. I wonder, did they specifically design it like that to be kind of a reflection of that similar event? Because when you look at Liam and Mason, Mason is to Liam as Stiles is to Scott. Like they're best friends, probably borderline, you know, borderline brothers, because, you know, Mason's kind of like amongst them, like Mason was kind of like the brains of their operations. He's the one, like he's kind of like the smarter one, I feel like at least between him and Liam, which is such a backhanded compliment to say. Like amongst him, Hayden, and Liam, it seemed to me like Mason kind of represented the Stiles of the group. But it's just that situation of wouldn't expect him out of anybody to have been the Beast, and it caught you off guard. I mean, like I said, luckily it was a situation where everyone they're able to, like, you know, Mason was safely able to be separated from the Beast without, you know, being completely consumed. And another thing to me, and this is a pretty big moment, I feel like, that set the tone for the entire show, and it's a pretty big monumentous moment at the end of season 3A, and that is Alison's death. It had such a big impact because it's not like Alison was the first character to die within the confines of the show. Technically, well, I mean, even like recurring character-wise or main character-wise, technically that was Peter, and then eventually like Alison's mom. But like amongst Scott's path of people he cares about, who, you know, people he loved, like she was the first person that he ever lost. I mean, you know, and she's actually technically the only person he ever lost amongst the main group. I mean, lost Kira, but Kira's situation was very different. She was kind of forced to kind of leave with the Skinwalkers. But Alison's death was just, you know, especially because she had that monumentous moment of where she used like a silver arrow, like ending things. It like, I forgot the exact circumstances, but she used it to save someone, take down one of the Firefly things, like Kira's mom's tails. They turn into those shadowy ninjas. Like I think they were called Fireflies. I feel like they had a different name. No, Oni, right? That's what it was. She took down one of the Oni, but another one attacked her. Either that or the Nagitsu they possess, Stiles, took her down. Wait, did I say 3A earlier? I meant 3B, season 3B. I mean, technically it was like season 3's finale, but specifically season 3B's finale. I think I said 3 earlier, so let me correct that. I do apologize. And like I brought up earlier, it isn't something that completely went away because Scott felt guilt over it to the point that the Anukate like tried to use that against him to make him feel guilty. It's like, oh, you tried to save so many people, but you couldn't. And like in particular, Alison, the woman that you loved and everything, probably your first love, I think. I mean, obviously within the confines of the show, that was his first love and everything. So it just, to me, it set a tone of being like, yeah, like don't be 100%. Like I said, no one amongst the main characters died after that, but it was still a situation to be like, holy crap, like they're not holding any bars. If they feel the need to kill off main characters, they will kill off main characters. It's not just like a, oh, they left and went off somewhere else. It's like, no, like Alison's dead. Obviously, Crystal Reed like came back in certain regards because obviously she played Sebastian's sister in the past, like, but it's just, you know, that meant so much. It held so much weight. So, but that is the end of my list. Do note these are just some. Like the entirety of Teen Wolf is amazing from top to bottom, but these are just some I felt of listing off. Maybe I'll do like a part 2 in the future where I list even more off, but it's just like I just had to pick some. I couldn't do a whole bunch. But because there's just so much goodness to kind of pick through from Teen Wolf, and even doing this video makes me kind of go, I kind of want to go back and rewatch the entire series, because the last time I rewatched the entire series was maybe before season 5B, so it's been like definitely over a year, it's like since I've seen the entire like series up to a certain point. So I kind of got that itch to kind of rewatch it all, just to kind of relive everything, you know, refresh a lot of stuff in my mind, because I brought a lot of stuff in this I wasn't 100% sure on, probably like 70 or 80% sure, but still. Do let me know in the comments down below if you want to, like, some of your favorite moments from Teen Wolf. Do you agree with some of my favorite moments, or you're like, oh no, you got that completely wrong? If you feel like correcting me about certain things, do. I'm fine with, like, you know, because I do tend to forget things, and maybe like I looked at things a different way that wasn't how it was meant to be interpreted or whatever. So do let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I love to hear what you had to say, what were some of your favorite moments. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it. Good day and good